We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Tesam and Beis and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 59b. The Gemara continues. Eliezer Zeira have a Messiah Messani Uchmi. He was wearing black shoes. V'koi b'shuka de Nahardoi, and he was standing in the marketplace of Nahardoi. Ashkechu devei Reish Galusa, the people of the house of the exilarch of the Reish Galusa, they found him. V'yamru and they said to him, Ma'ishna hani Messani, what's the difference that you're wearing these unique kind of shoes? Amar Lui said to them, to come avilna Yerushalayim, because I am mourning over the loss of Yerushalayim. Amrulay, they said to him, At chashivas lisabula Yerushalayim, you think you're so important that you can mourn like this for Yerushalayim? Savar you are a havis. So they thought that he was being arrogant, that he was doing this in public. Asiyua v'chavshua, so they brought him and they imprisoned him. Amar Luhu, he said to them, Gavar Rabba, and I'm a great person, I'm a great scholar. Amrulay, they said to him, Minoya Dinan, how do we know that you're a great scholar? Amar Luhu, so he said to them, O atun bo minoi milsa, either you should ask me a question, O anoi bo minaychu milsa, or I will ask you a question. Amrulay, so they said to him, Boy at, you should ask a question. And the Gemara continues, Amar Luhu, he said to them, Haiman the cuts kufr, if somebody cuts from a date palm, my mishalim, what does he pay? How do you evaluate the damages? Amrulay, they said to him, Mishalim to make kufr, you have to pay the amount of the kufr. It's talking about a situation where it's not yet fully ripe dates. Tamri, so he asked them, but isn't it eventually going to be fully ripe dates? Amrulay, so they said to him, Mishalim to make tamri, fine, so pay the full value of the dates. Amar Lahu, but he said to them, V'halav tamri shakel mine, but he didn't take dates, he didn't damage dates, it wasn't fully grown at the time of the damage. Amrulay, so they said to him, Eimalon at, so you tell us what the answer is. Amar Lahu b'shishim, so he said to them, you have to evaluate it by multiplying by 60, again in the context of the greater field. Amrulay, they said to him, Man Amar Kavasech, who says like you, who supports your position? Amar Lahu, he said to them, Hashmuel chayu bezdino kayim, Shmuel is alive, his court is around, so we should see what Shmuel's court says. Shadru kami de Shmuel, so they sent in front of Shmuel. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Shapir ka Amar Lahu, he's saying the right answer to you, Beshishim, that you evaluate by multiplying by 60, Veshavku, and they released him, they let him go. And Rashi explains, Mesani Uchmi, again he wore the black shoes, Minag Avelim, that's like the custom of mourners. Kufra bitmarim keboser by novim. Rashi says kufra by dates is the same as boser by novim. Again, the idea is it's not fully grown, not fully ripened. To make kufra eno klumli machar achshav, the value of kufra, that's nothing. You can't really sell those right now, they have no value. V'have tamri, but he said, but it's going to be dates, la'achar zman, after some time that will develop to a date. And then finally, the Gemara said, B'shishim, you do it multiplying by 60, im hakarka, meaning together with the land, ta'akol bechlal sha'akona karka b'peiroseh, no sein ein of ktsas b'shvach shalachar zman. That includes everything, because when someone buys land with its fruits, he's thinking about the improvement that's going to happen in some time. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, achla peiros gemurim v'chulu, if the animal eats fruits that are fully ripened, that are full, so then you have to pay the value of those fruits. You don't evaluate the damages in the context of the larger field. And the Gemara says, my time, and what's the reason of Rabbi Shimon? Because that which the pasuk said, ubir b'stei melamed sheshamen al gaf hasada, which taught us that you have to evaluate in the context of the larger field. Hani mili midi ditzarich l'sada. That's only true of fruits that still require the field to grow. But these fruits which are peiros gemurim, these are already fully grown. Kevin de lotzrichi l'sada, since they don't require the field, beinayu by shalom, you have to pay for them for their exact value, what they are actually worth, not in the context of the larger field. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna bar Chiya, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Rav Huna bar Chiya said that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba said, Don Rav ke Rabbi Meir, that Rav ruled like Rabbi Meir. We'll see in a moment what Rabbi Meir said. Upasak hilchasa ke Rabbi Shimon, and also he passed like Rabbi Shimon. That's Rabbi Shimon of our Mishnah. Don Rav ke Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir ruled like Rav ruled like Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, kasav l'rishon v'lo chasmalo. Let's say he wrote it over to a first buyer. This is talking about property that a husband really had designated to pay his wife's ksuba, so he writes it over that he's going to sell it to a first buyer, but she doesn't sign it. She doesn't sign off on the sale. But then he writes it over to a second buyer, and she does sign off on the sale. So of the ksuba, so she loses her ksuba. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yechol Hishatomer, she can always say, Nachas ruach asisi labali. I was just doing what was pleasing to my husband. I really didn't want to sign off on the sale. I didn't really agree. Atem malochem, what claim do you have against me? The idea over here is that according to Rabbi Meir, since to the first person she didn't sign over, so Rabbi Meir says she can't say nachas ruach asisi labali on the second buyer, because then she would have done it for the first buyer. Rabbi Yehuda says no, nevertheless, even in that case, she can say nachas ruach asisi labali. And so the idea is, in this machlokas Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Rav ruled like Rabbi Meir. Upasak hilchasa Rabbi Shimon, and then also he paskin like Rabbi Shimon, kihad detanan, like that which we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, achla peiros gemurin meshalemes peiros gemurin. If the animal eats full fruit, so then you have to pay for the fully ripe fruits. Im sa'ah, if it was a saw of fruit, then you pay a saw. Im sasayim, and if it was two saw, then you pay two saw. And Rashi says, Don Rav Maisa Ava. Don Rav means that he actually ruled this way in an actual case. Pasak Hilchasa means Kilomar Limei L'Talmidim. That just means he taught the students. So there is a difference between the language. When it came to Rabbi Meir, he actually ruled like that in a case. Pasak Hilchasa, when it came to Rabbi Shimon, he taught the Talmidim that is the halacha. Shalacha Rabbi Shimon halacha psuka l'doros, that this is the halacha for generations. Lo chasma lo sada ham yuchedes l'ksuba. Again, she didn't sign off on this sale in terms of the field that was designated for her ksuba. Of the ksuba, Rabbi Meir says she loses her ksuba. V'lo matzis lomar nachas ruach asisi labali. She can't say I was doing it just to please my husband. Dimkein havalo lemevad l'rishon, because if that was the case, she should have done it by the first buyer. Elavade gamro mikniya. Rather, it's clear that she has really agreed to this sale. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hamagadish besoch sadeh chaveru shelo b'rishos. If somebody stacks his grain in the field of his friend with no permission, v'achalton behemto shel bal hasadeh, and the animal of the owner of the field eats the grain, potter, so the owner of the field is potter because this person stacked the grain in that field without permission. Now, if the animal was damaged because of the stack of grain, bal hagadish chayev, then the owner of the stack of grain is chayev. V'im higdish b'rishos. Now, if the owner of the stack of grain stacked the grain in the field with permission of the owner of the field, Bal Hasadeh Chayev, the Bal Hasadeh, the owner of the field, is Chayev for any damage that grain does, because by giving permission, he is also taking upon himself responsibility. And the Gemara says, Lema Tanan de lo Karevi. Let us say our Mishnah is not like Rebbe. This was Rebbe we had earlier. To Rebbe, because if we're following Rebbe, Lishmor. He said that the Balabais is only responsible to watch over it if he explicitly accepts that he's going to watch over it. Just giving permission does not mean you're accepting responsibility. According to Rebbe, that does not seem like the Mishnah. Amar Rav Papa says, Hacha ben Natar beidari askin. And here we're talking about the shomer at the threshing floor. To Kevin Damar le Ayel Ugdosh, because in that particular situation, when he says, come in, bring your stuff in and stack it, Ayel ve'enter lachu. There he really means to say, bring it in, and I will watch it. That's just the custom in that situation. Rashi says, Natar beidari shomer hagronas. Again, it's somebody who's a shomer by the threshing floor. That's what he does. He watches over the goren. Shemin hagan hayalasos kol b'nei habika begoren echad. What the minhag was that everybody would do the threshing in one goren. Zegedisha for Zegedisha, this guy would put his pile, the other one would put his pile. Umiman and shomer, they would just appoint a shomer to watch over all of it. Uvahi, and in that situation, afilu Rebbe Moda, even Rebbe admits that person is taking responsibility by giving permission. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hasholeach es habe'ira bi'ad cheresh shot v'katan. If somebody sends a fire in the hands of a cheresh shot v'katan, a deaf mute or an imbecile or a minor, pater b'dinei adam, that person is pater in terms of the human laws, v'chayev b'dinei shamayim, but he is chayev by the heavenly laws. Shalach bi'ad pikeach, if he sends it in the hands of an intelligent person, ha-pikeach chayev, the intelligent person is the one who's chayev if the fire causes damage. He is responsible. Echad hevi esa or ve'echad hevi esa eitzim. If one person first brings the fire, then somebody else brings the wood, hamevi esa eitzim chayev, the person who brings the wood is going to be responsible. Echad hevi esa eitzim ve'echad hevi esa or. Now, if the first person brings the wood, and then the second person brings the fire to light, hamevi esa or chayev, then the person who's bringing the fire is going to be chayev. Ba'acher v'liba, if somebody else comes and fans the flames, hamalab chayev, then the person who's fanning the flames is chayev. Libsa haruach, if the wind is what fans the flames and causes them to spread, kulan peturin, then they are all exempt. And the Gemara says, Amar Reish Lakish Mishmei de Chizkiya. Reish Lakish says in the name of Chizkiya, Lo shanu ala shamasar lo gachelis v'liba. It's only true if he gives him a coal and then he causes that fire to spread. That's when we say he's pater b'dinei adam. Aval masar lo shalevis. But if the person gives the actual flame to the chereshot of v'katan, so then chayev, then already that person who gave it to the chereshot of v'katan is chayev. My time, what's the reason? Mais of garmulu. It's because his actions ultimately really cause this damage to happen. Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu masar lo shall have his potter. Even if he gives him a flame, he's potter. My time, what's the reason? Savza the cheresh garmalo, because it's really the actions of the deaf mute that have caused this damage. V'lo mechayev ad sheyimser lo gavza. and he's not chayiv until he gives him branches and other materials that the Gemara will identify. We'll take a look at the Mosif Rashi. This Rashi is from earlier in the Mesechet. Tzavsa decheresh garma. What does it mean, tzavsa? Achizaso shel hacheresh garma. However, meaning to say, in the case where he gave flames, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's still the actions, the grabbing of the deaf mute that's causing the fire. Shunatla, because he takes the fire, and he brings it over to the stack of grain. Tzavsa, according to this understanding, the word tzavsa is achizaso v'kocho, his grabbing it in his strength. Miloshan tzavsa shakoran tanailish. L'shnachrin, another understanding of tzavsa, garsin and tzavsa, instead of having with a bays, it should be with vavs. That should be the word tzavsa. Yichudo shel cheresh, shenisiyachid emashal heves v'nal. That means the yichudo, the fact that he was alone with the flame and took it. V'loshan tzavsa shulish kedamrin and lahavit tzavsa lechavero. So that's another understanding of the word tzavsa. And gavsa, Rashi says earlier again in the Mosif Rashi, eitzim yaveshim. It refers to dry wood. Again, he's only chayiv if he gives him the dry wood and some other items we will talk about. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Amud Aleph.